Hello, everybody. Welcome to Parenting Against the Grain. I haven't been live in a week or so. It's just been busy, so welcome back. I'm trying to do a live session once a week, usually on Thursdays, just to talk about a topic that might be of interest or that I've had questions about on the blog or in this group. I'm going to hang out for a second here and see if we get anybody watching live, which is always nice. I know we have people from all over the world, so it's sometimes hard to find a time that works for people. Some people are asleep during this time on the other side of the globe. So if you're around, hopefully a few people will watch and check in live. It's always fun. So school has started. How's everybody doing with back to school time? We start pretty early here in Colorado, so we've been in school now for almost 3 weeks. We started the middle of August. Dana's here, yay! So we've been here for a while in school now for a bit. Other people started later, so you're probably still getting a little settled into the new routine with your kids. So I'm going to wait just another minute. Does anybody have any questions to start off or ideas that they want to talk about? I'm welcome to put those in the comment box. We are camping this weekend, and we have not tent camped in probably over a year. So if anyone has tips for me about what to pack for tent camping, we have camped in a camper a lot, but we have not tent camped in a little bit here. So wish me luck. I'm not always the best tent camper, but I'm willing to give it a try. So if you are an avid camper, send me your tips because I might need them. I'm packing today and a little bit tomorrow. So send me your tips. Okay, let's get started with the topic at hand, which is after school meltdowns. We see this so much this time of year, or it may be later in the year, depends on how your child is, right? Sometimes the first of the year goes really well, no meltdowns, and then as you get through the end of the year, that's when they start to crop up. So first of all, I think it's good to recognize that after school meltdowns are common. There's not something wrong with your child if this happens. It's very common. It's also called restraint collapse, which I think is an interesting word for it because it really is descriptive of what happens. Most kids can kind of keep themselves composed during the school day pretty well. And if they, have some challenging moments during the day, they'll kind of maybe keep that close to themselves and maybe not cry at school or, unless something's really rough. They kind of a lot of kids it's really interesting. Can be very stoic at school and not cry and keep themselves together. And it says something about like the culture of school, right? That they feel like they can't really express themselves completely at school. And most of us went to school, had that situation. I remember experiencing that where I'm like, I can't cry at school. If something bad happens, I have to keep it together. So that's the restraint, right? We have that restraint for so long, but then when you get home, kids get home, the restraint collapses, literally, like they can't hold it together anymore. And it's not always that something terrible has happened at school. Sometimes it's just the normal stress of the day. They have a lot of interactions with a lot of kids and teachers, and there's stuff that goes on at recess, and there's all these interactions, and it all kind of just comes out at home. So actually, I think most people consider, restraint collapse or an after school meltdown almost to be sort of a good sign in a way, because that means your kids feel comfortable at home. They feel comfortable with you to let down, their guard and to be real and to let their emotions out. And we all have to have that, right? We have to have those people that we trust and can be ourselves with. And so hopefully you are that for your child. And I think most parents are. So that is actually a good sign if they're melting down after school in a weird way. It happens to my kids very often. Let me just say, you are not alone in this instance. I would say at least once a week, one of my kids melts down, and then usually another day, another kid melts down. So one day it might be the 10-year-old, and 2 days later it might be the 6-year-old. Who knows? Sometimes it happens the same day, which is not fun. But It happens very commonly. So what can we do about it? That's the question that parents really want to know. And some of this is based on research and some of it is just experience. And if you guys have ideas that have worked for you, please add them in the comments because we are all here to support one another. So I think the common thing that everybody talks about with after school meltdowns is meet your child's basic needs first. So even if you have to go run errands after you pick them up or you have after school activities, basic needs need to be met immediately. And that is food, water, and depending on your child, maybe quiet, maybe exercise. So you can gauge that, but definitely food, water. Get that in right away. I meet the kids at the door pretty much with a snack that has protein, something pretty healthy and they are starving after school. I think most kids are like this. They are just starved because lunch was a long time ago. They don't usually have an afternoon snack at school. Sometimes they have a morning snack. So they're starved. So meet all those needs first, I think and most people know this is pretty common sense, right? Some kids respond really well to quiet after school or maybe listening to an audiobook or, making like a little fort or a tent. Dana, I know she's friends with me in real life. She mentioned that helped her son. And I've heard common things like that from parents, like put like a quiet corner, put some music on, something like that helps some kids. Now, some kids that doesn't work for them and they might need something active. Go to the park and play or, play catch in the backyard or something like that. Sometimes that helps. So meeting basic needs first, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, I think that is important is don't take it personally. So it's very hard when your kid is getting very emotional and sometimes they do lash out at you. I mean, my kids do that and they'll say stuff, you're the worst mom in the world. And you just have to step back and just realize this is not really their right brain talking, their, higher level brain. This is sort of like the reptile brain talking, and don't take it personally. I mean, I know it's hard to hear that and not want to respond and like lay down the law and, bring out the discipline and all that. But I think personally what has worked better is to just kind of let it go. And not everybody might agree with that, but when they're lashing out like that, it's usually not really about you. It's just about this restraint collapse and all this pent up emotion. And so I just try not to take it personally, let it kind of exit their system, and then you can move on to something else. So that's my approach to it. I know other people probably would be a lot more strict and more, disciplined about it, but we have to set limits with their behavior, right? They can't hit their brother or hit you, or there are limits to what is allowed even when you're in restraint collapse. But for the most part, I would say if it's less serious, then I would just let it go and hopefully they'll come back around after an hour or two. Tip number 3 that I feel like helps is listen more, talk less. And so this has been a long time in coming for me in terms of like learning how to deal with this. And, my oldest is 10, so I've had some years to cope with this. But at first, he would start melting down and all these emotions would come out. And I would try to really like, we're going to solve this. We're going to get you in a good mood. We're going to push past this and try to talk him out of it. And really, I found that usually doesn't work. If you try too hard to cheer them up or like, oh, let's go get ice cream or let's go do this, that might work for a few minutes, but it's really not going to solve the problem. The problem is they have this pent up emotion that has to come out. And so I feel like just letting it come out and not really trying to distract them out of it, to me, is really the best approach. Now, again, you have to figure out what works for your kid. But I know some of you have read the book, The Yes Brain, and that is one of my favorite books, parenting books. And they talk a lot about this in the book, and it relates to how we build emotional skills in our kids. If we always try to distract them out of negative feelings and like, oh, it's not that big a deal, it's going to be okay, let's just go out and let's go out and have pizza and not think about it. And so that stuff works occasionally, and there's times for that, but over the course of the time with your kids, if you do that consistently, try to distract them out of negative feelings, it's really not serving them well, because then they don't learn the skills to cope with that negative feeling, and we all do that ourselves sometimes. We have a hard day at work, sometimes you just want to sit on the sofa and eat ice cream. We all have those moments, right? But if you did that all the time to try to cheer yourself up, it wouldn't be the most healthy response. And so helping them understand that negative emotions happen to everybody. Everybody has bad days, and let them talk about it and get it out. And you can do some problem solving if something comes up that you think that you can help with, like they're struggling with a certain subject in school, or someone at school was mean to them. Those things usually come out during this time, and you can problem solve, if not at that moment, maybe later on in the evening or something. And because you do want to hear what the problems are. But I think the key is to not just sort of distract them away from it and try to cope with it in a real way. So one example of this was the other day with my 6-year-old. He came home from school and he was doing pretty well. And then we went to the park to throw the football around. And all of a sudden, he just started begging to get a microphone. He's had this fascination with like toy microphones or even real microphones. I guess his teachers use microphones at school sometimes, those ones that you wear around your neck. And he just thinks that's the coolest thing, and he wants a microphone. And I said, well, you can put it on your Christmas list. We can talk about it for a gift or something, but we're not going to buy one today, right? We don't just do that for no reason. Well, that set him off. So he went into this, I would say it was a good half hour of begging and pleading and please, mom, that voice that kids have, please, mom, all this about wanting a microphone and on and on and on. Well, about 15 minutes into this, I pretty much realized this was not about a microphone. It was about, after school restraint collapse. And this was just kind of the issue that tipped him off. But so we talked about it a little bit, and I kept saying, well, you can put it on your Christmas list. Well, finally, it occurred to me that nothing I was saying was really helping. And so I just kind of let him whine and complain and carry on. And we kind of tossed the football while he was whining and complaining. Eventually went back to the house, and it carried on. And then after, half an hour, when he realized that I wasn't giving in and this wasn't going anywhere, and then he just stopped on his own, and I didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to punish. We didn't have to go put him in timeout. We didn't have to. He just stopped because he ran out of energy, I guess, and all the emotion came out. And so I guess my point is, not that I'm a perfect parent and I don't, this is not how it plays out every time, but the idea of listening more and talking less, I think, can really pay off in these situations, that the kids just need to get that out, get that emotion out, even if it doesn't seem like the way that you think it would come out. And then, after he got all that out, he was much happier. And that's usually what happens. Once they get all that emotion out, he actually came over to me and gave me a hug and was like, I love you, Mom. And then the rest of the evening went fairly well. He just had to get it out. And so I think it makes us so anxious when our kids are upset. And I know for people who, especially parents who have the temperament, that makes you really anxious when you see your kids upset. And that's a lot of us. It's normal to feel like you want to solve the problem right away, but sometimes it just has to play out, and it will be okay, and they will get past it. And then you can kind of reconnect. And I think that happens pretty frequently. But you can listen and be responsive, but you don't have to engage in that argument with them or the battle of wills. You can just kind of let it be and reconnect later. I think that oftentimes works better. Okay, so that was number 4. Listen more, talk less. Number 3. Number 4 I wanted to talk about was listen or attend to underlying needs or causes. So this seems like it's contradictory to number 3, right? But the thing is, it is about listening. And I think what happens is that over time, after the kids get some of that emotion out, then if there is really an underlying problem at school or something that has come up, then it will come out after all that emotion is kind of released. This is what I've seen happen, at least. I'm sure it's different for every kid. But a lot of times what I will see happen is, there'll be all these tears and emotion and they're upset. And then finally, after all this comes out, they said, they'll say something like, I have no friends at school, or I had a really bad day. I really bombed this test, this spelling test, or whatever it was. So then you get to the root cause of what's going on, or at least part of it. Then you can start addressing those issues, or maybe later in the evening you talk about it when they're a little calmer. But I think it's helpful to figure out if there is some underlying issue, what that is, and be responsive to that and attentive to, is there really something going on? Are they being bullied at school, or is there some friendship issue, conflict going on, or whatever it might be? If there is really something that you can help them deal with at school, then that is the time, or maybe later in the evening, to address that and figure out, okay, this is part of what there's all this emotion is because something bad happened, or they're going through some sort of challenge at school. And so that is really helpful, I think. Once you get past that first emotional part, then sometimes sort of the truth of the matter comes out. And so you can then figure out, okay, do I need to talk to a teacher about what's going on, or whatever you think the best mode of action would be for that situation. But sometimes kids don't come to that right away. They don't come home from school and be like, oh, I failed this test, or this kid was really mean to me at school. That's not always the first thing that comes out. Sometimes it does, but sometimes all this emotion comes out first, and crying, and sometimes yelling, and then the big issue is underneath all that. So that's just something to keep in mind. And as I said, we struggle with this, and I think a lot of parents do. I don't have all the answers. If you have things that have worked for you, please share them, because we want to help each other. But these are just a few things I've noticed, and I think it's helpful to hear what other parents go through and know that you're not alone in this. And after school meltdown is common. So if you're experiencing that after school, hopefully these tips will help a little bit, ideas. And again, post any questions or ideas in the comments, and I will come back. If you watch this later, I'll come back and try to respond to those, or we can have a little online chat about it. So I hope everyone is finishing up the week here well, and thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.